Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started. And thank you for coming to For Us, By Us, Intersectional Identities as Artifacts of Systemic Racism and HIV Prevention by the Prep and Black America Coalition. My name is Michael Chansley. I am the Communications and Mobilization Manager at Prep for All, also a member of the Prep and Black America Coalition. I've done a lot of work as a social worker linking people to HIV prevention and treatment services. And one of the big things that we've been working on, that I've been working on lately, is advocating for a federally funded national PrEP program and advocating that HIV funding is not cut through our Save HIV funding campaign, which you'll learn more about throughout the presentation.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. My name is John Mead. I'm Senior Program Manager for Policy at AVAC. I'm a LGBTQIA HIV/AIDS prevention advocate. Um, my job is basically to go to Congress and to knock on doors and make sure that all things HIV research, HIV prevention, HIV treatment programs, initiatives get funded, and scream as loud as possible to make sure that those things get funded and they don't get cut. So I am super happy to be here. I am also an organizing member of the Prep in Black America Coalition. Yeah, thank you for being here.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rico Boone. I'm the HIV Project Director at Treatment Action Group, a think tank based in New York, but I'm actually here in Washington, D.C. I also identify as a queer black man living with HIV for almost 20 years. It'll be 20 years this November. And I'm an organizing member of the Prep in Black America campaign as well. At Treatment Action Group, I manage several programs focused on ending the HIV epidemic, community engagement around HIV and COVID and other pandemics, and also the Act Now End AIDS Coalition, which you'll probably hear more about over the course of the conference. And if we can, I would love to put someone on the spot here. If we could all give a round of applause for Leisha McKinley Beach, who is responsible for putting us all together. This was, yeah. So this is, in many ways, the Prep in Black America initiative is Leisha's brainchild. She was responsible for, mobilizing all of us, Black advocates who work at various organizations to launch this campaign. And so, if you want to give a couple words.
I just wanted to come and enjoy the session and support my sons, and but I really do believe in what the coalition is doing, and I think that there are three amazing experts on the stage that is helping to frame what Prep in Black America can look like, what the scale up will be, and see the impact of having Prep access in Black communities. So thank you for having me.
Would you read your quote for us?
Sure. We can't say PrEP is a success in America until Black America has benefited from it.
And also want to shout out Kenyon Farrow and Mandisa Moore O'Neill, who are also a part of the Prep and Black America Coalition. We have a few more members who are running around the conference, but just we're acknowledging the people in the room, and also want to give a shout out to the rest of the coalition members who you'll see throughout the conference at different presentations. Okay. I'm sorry, I keep clicking it on my screen, and I'm like, why isn't it moving? Okay, so some of the learning objectives that we're going to have today. By the end of the session, participants will be able to describe the impact of intersections of race, power, and oppression on health, discuss social and political factors that affect access to and use of PrEP in Black communities, including advocacy towards a national PrEP program, and identify a minimum of 3 community-derived strategies to scale up PrEP in Black communities. So I always like to make things a little interactive. So we're gonna do a little icebreaker today. If everybody can kind of, I'm not gonna make strict rules about it. You're gonna have to get in like groups of 2 or 3 or 4. Just with a few people around you. We have some questions up. So we're gonna kind of do like rapid fire, like a game show, where we want to see how many of these answers you can come up with within, say, the next 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, so I'll read them aloud. So, what year did the FDA approve the first drug for PrEP? So we're kind of mixing it up with some prep questions and some policy questions. How many U.S. senators does each state have? What is the name of the 2023 court case that ruled insurance companies do not have to cover certain preventative services, including PrEP? Hint, that ruling was in Texas. As of 2021, what percent of black people who could benefit from PrEP are actually on it? Of the three forms of PrEP, which one has not been FDA approved for cisgender women? And what are the names of the two research studies that proved long-acting cabotegravir or Apretude to be just as effective at preventing HIV as the once daily oral pill Truvada? And this one is kind of like a little bonus question. Name three significant barriers that prevent PrEP uptake amongst the black community. So it's 206. Let's see how many of these you can get by 210. And talk amongst the people next to you. Okay. All right. Time's up. I see people still discussing. You're going to be disqualified? No, I'm joking. We're having fun. We're having fun. Okay. So who can tell us the year the FDA approved the first drug for PrEP? Correct. And what was that drug? Truvada.
The answer was 2012.
How many U.S. senators does each state have? 2. What is the name of the 2023 court case that ruled insurance companies do not have to cover certain preventative services, including PrEP? Wait, before you answer, let's give a round of applause to Danielle Campbell, our co-presenter, for just setting the stage on fire during the last plenary. Okay. And do you want to take a second to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Danielle. I'm public health advocate and organizer from Los Angeles, California. Thank you for coming to our session. Sorry, I'm winded. I was trying to get out of that plenary, but you can't make it out sometimes.
Okay. So what was the name of that 2023 case?
A little louder. Right.
Yeah, Braidwood versus Becerra.
That's correct.
All right. Anybody want to tell us just in like 30 seconds, tell us a little bit about Braidwood versus
A
Becerra?
little sconce. You got it? What is it? What is it? Can you stand up and project? Thank you.
Somebody's coming with a microphone.
I can be loud too. So the case deals with private entities as well as insurance providers of these entities refusing covering PrEP or any additional HIV preventative drug.
Right. So, to add a little context, the U.S. I always mess this acronym up. Sorry, and I say it all the time. The USPSTF. Got it. So they gave oral PrEP a grade A rating, saying that basically saying that insurance companies have to cover it, including not just the medication, but also lab costs and provider costs. And basically the Braidwood versus Becerra case, and this falls under the Affordable Care Act. Basically the Braidwood versus Becerra case, which came out of Texas, we know those judges are very anti-Affordable Care Act. I'm sorry?
A little sketch.
Yeah. So anything that they can do to sabotage the Affordable Care Act through judicial rulings, they will. And one of the things that they said was that it was that the USPSTF didn't have the right to require insurance companies to cover certain preventative services, including PrEP. Okay, of the three forms of PrEP, which one has not been FDA approved for cisgender women? Descovy. And want to tell us a little about that research?
Sure. So there are several research studies that are currently underway that look at the effectiveness of Descovy in people who were not included in that indication for cisgender men and transgender women, that affords them access to another biomedical HIV prevention tool. It's an oral medication called Descovy.
Thank you.
Of course.
And what are the names of the two research studies that prove long-acting cabotegravir or Apertude to be just as effective at preventing HIV as the once-daily oral Truvada? Not the Discover trial.
That's the one I should have talked about. So the Discover trial said that Descovy was safe to use in cisgender men, transgender women, but not for cisgender women and other people with vaginas. And yes.
Okay, and our final question: name 3 significant barriers that prevent PrEP uptake amongst the Black community. Can I get somebody to volunteer with one? I see a hand over here. I'm sorry. Medical mistrust.
Absolument. Here in the green. Access, absolute.
Lack of access, correct.
Visibility. And I saw another hand over here in the corner from the young lady with the gold rose. Okay. Over here, and I'll come to you last. Education, lack of education. Last, stigma. Thank you all for those very astute responses.
And provider biases and racism.
Can't forget that.
Like
We have to call it
what it is. It's racism. Yes. We can sugarcoat it. We can. At the end of the day, it's racism. It's
specifically anti-blackness.
So, sorry, it's this one over here. Could you press play on it? All right, so we're going to show a video from the first PrEP in Black America Summit. And so while we're queuing that video up, so we have held 2 summits, one in Atlanta and one in New Orleans within the last year. The first one was September 2022. The last one was just in May in New Orleans. The first one was in Atlanta, Georgia at Thrive SS. And ready? Okay.
Some priorities of what a national PrEP program would need to look like in order to address the racial disparities, particularly among Black folks in PrEP access, use, adherence, etc., that we all know.
Nearly since the beginning of the epidemic, Black people have been disproportionately impacted by HIV in this country and globally. If we have any sort of seriousness at all about, ending the HIV epidemic, as we've been sort of talking about the last decade, then Black people have to be at the front of the line in terms of access to treatment and to prevention. And PrEP is a major prevention strategy.
Today, only 9% of Black people who could benefit from PrEP are using it.
We have absolutely every tool we need now to end HIV. PrEP is one of them. And when we think about the amazing medical advances of PrEP and how Black communities could benefit greatly from it, but we're not. You have to look at the reasons why. And everything is not about personal behavior and choice. Some of this is the infrastructure and the systemic issues that Black people have had with HIV from its very existence.
When we look at HIV and we see how we are disproportionately affected, we are only 13% of the US population, yet we consist of more than 50% of the new HIV diagnoses every year. Until we examine those things, HIV is always going to be prevalent within our communities, regardless of the level of access that we have.
We're at the culmination of more than 450 years of systemic oppression. And that systemic oppression sits right at the juncture of sexual and reproductive health rights and justice. So when you talk about HIV and you lift up all of the societal ills that create vulnerability. And at the top of all these measures or indices of vulnerability sit Black people.
When you are part of a community that's either been over sexualized or demonized because of your sexuality, having something that relieves that anxieties, having something that puts you in control of your sexual health, is definitely something we all need access to.
PrEP is a really powerful tool that we have to combat HIV. And really, unless we're able to get PrEP to Black people, it will be impossible to end the HIV epidemic.
I'm grateful this summit was organized to find solutions to the problem of uptake in the Black community.
I think what stood out the most to me today was that people were hungry for this conversation. These are people who are advocates, they're peer navigators, they're PrEP users, they're PrEP navigators. They see what's happening.
And when you look at all those strategies, and I'm seeing that we're all coming at it from very different angles, I think that that's a beautiful thing, and I think that that's how we move forward.
I think what really worked well today with the PrEP and Black America Summit is we didn't just come together and brag about the work that each individual or each organization is doing. We didn't just come together to spread awareness. We actually came together to talk about the challenges and the systemic barriers we have to get in the Black community on PrEP.
There is something fundamentally missing with the way the systems of care, treatment, and prevention are set up. They are not set up to serve our people for a various number of reasons that we've described here today.
It really moved me because I've been in the work since 2012, right? And before 2012, but certainly since, PrEP was, first approved, or first drug approved for PrEP. And it never occurred to me that what we were doing today was the first time that this sort of thing had happened before.
Today's meeting was really so important because it was about figuring out the beginning of the roadmap that will allow us to ensure that we have equitable access to PrEP specifically for Black people.
And so when we organized the PrEP and Black America Summit, we were just talking about it earlier today. We started the advocates that we mentioned earlier. We started having conversations about basically we were saying, how can we, the Black community and Black advocates, commemorate the 10-year anniversary of PrEP being FDA approved? And we started having these conversations via Zoom. And I think after about
Text.
email, text, and we started having ideas. Should we write an op-ed? Should we do some infographics? And I think we just, as we talk more and more about the numbers and the barriers, we kind of realize, okay, we have to go big. We have to do something bigger than an op-ed or social media campaign, and kind of setting it up for Danielle to explain some of the numbers behind PrEP. But again, once we started looking at those numbers and those barriers, we decided we have to do something in person with the PrEP and Black America Summit in Atlanta. And we didn't do it. We didn't have any pharma funding. We didn't have federal funding. We actually didn't have any guaranteed funding when we decided to do it. So it really came from organic conversations, and we were like, we'll find the money to do it once let's just move forward and do it. And luckily we did get funding for both summits from the Red Hot organization, as well as in Atlanta we got support from the Cobb Douglas Health Department, and in New Orleans we got support from the Louisiana Department of Health. So as I said, we started looking at those numbers and those barriers. So I'm going to go ahead and let Danielle explain some of those numbers and barriers for us. Sure.
So when folks look at PrEP by the numbers, just a bit of statistical data to ground the conversation and really the movement. Michael described it as several conversations we were having, but we were really emblazoned by this data to say, what can we do? So when you look at PrEP by the numbers, I know you all may have heard that Black people represent between 13 and 14% of the total U.S. population. Depending on who you're talking to, I'm going to claim 14. But we represent 42% of new HIV diagnoses nationally. So when you juxtapose the two, 14% contribute to 42% of incident HIV diagnoses. So that's your trigger in your mind. That's a really big disparity. And at the root of those disparities, we offer that there are social and structural inequities that contribute to that increasing 42%. So we also learned, as part of pulling together this conversation as a framework, that there's only between 9 and 11, well, I'm going to say 11% according to most recent data, 11% of Black people who could benefit from taking PrEP so that they don't roll over into that 42% have been prescribed it. Also, something that should be sobering for you. 14% of people contribute to 42% of diagnoses. 11% of who have been offered a life sustaining preventive biomedical tool. So, again, framing those structural and social inequities that drive HIV diagnoses. So, we want to dispel some myths. It is not simply because Black people are more sexual. I'd offer we're more sexualized, but we're not more sexual, right? We say, and this is also evidence informed, that systems of HIV care, prevention, treatment, however you want to call it, they continue to fail Black people because there's absolutely no reason why. Back to the numbers, right? The numbers will set us free. 14, that contributes to 42. Of that, only 11% have been offered PrEP as a tool to prevent HIV. So continue to ask yourself, why is that? What is it that we're doing or not, exposed to or not, based upon the trivia question that we asked each of you all today? Some folks said lack of access, some folks said mistrust, distrust, some folks said lack of awareness. We'll begin to paint the picture a little more clearly through the conversations that we're going to have today. And this is a bi-directional dialogue. We are not here to lecture at you. Okay? Everybody's so quiet. Okay, thank you.
And also, when we look at those systemic barriers, we also have to think about where a large majority of Black people in the United States reside in the South. And what do we know about the South when it comes to healthcare? The South did not expand Medicaid. So again, that right there, that shows like the racist implications of it. We didn't expand healthcare access in a region of the country where most Black people reside.
Where large numbers of the health inequities that we see not only across HIV but other STIs and other comorbid conditions reside resoundingly in the South amongst those same states that chose not to expand Medicaid. So you already have marginalized, vulnerable people, and you take away the one fundamental public health right. So what does that mean for the future of Black people? Does that mean wellness? Absolutely not. So just here you see a map or you see some figures that really describe some of the disparities that we've been speaking about in consideration of where the national epidemic lies. You juxtapose that to the rate or number of prescriptions for PrEP that folks are actually being provided. This screams inequity. This screams disparity. And in all of that screaming and chaos, the PrEP in Black America movement was birthed. And so we are fully aligned in our awareness of these sociostructural and systemic factors that contribute to this 42% that we talked about. So 14, 42, 11. Walk away with those three numbers in your mind. So I'm a doctoral student and I'm taught to frame things in the context of theoretical approaches. So we look at this theoretical approach called intersectionality. Rico may be a more seasoned expert in the topic than I, since he was trained by, the master of intersectionality. But it's really a framework that looks at some of these social constructs. So when you talk about race, when you talk about ethnicity, we talk about gender identity, how these things come together, bless you, or intersect to create negative health outcomes among people. So for us, it was really looking at our racial identity as Black people, regardless of our gender or sexual identity, to really understand how being born into generational poverty or not, simply because of where we live or not, who we love or not, may predispose us to having HIV and other comorbid sexually transmitted infections. So we really wanted to understand why, but in reviewing this intersectionality framework that was really birthed in, I think, 1987 or 89 by a bad health equity leader called Kimberly Crenshaw. If you don't know who she is, I suggest you Google her and read this master text. So after reviewing this text, it really put a lot of the public health and social ills that befall Black people into context for me. That is not, it is not simply an artifact of where we live that contributes to some of the social diseases that disproportionately affect us. We have to look at these other social, structural, and ecological considerations. So we talk about racism, we talked about gender, we talk about divestment of resources in the communities where we live, work, love, and play. And it's intentional, it's systematic, right? So we use this framework to really ground the PIBA movement. And we've had mad successes as a result of considering centering our Blackness in the space. Next slide. So, sorry, y'all, we are just in between devices.
I kept getting confused.
That's all right. That's all right. So you all highlighted what some of the barriers to PrEP access look like. So when we talk about HIV stigma, lack of positive approaches representing the diversity of Black communities, we are diverse, right? We come together under this umbrella of our shared cultural Blackness. But if you continue to sexualize us, if you continue to divest resources that keep us safe and healthy, as a result of these HIV stigma related considerations, then that's what will prevent our access to PrEP. Mistrust of historically problematic medical systems. I would offer that they are not always set up in positions that support our wellness, but in fact as industrial complexes that make certain groups of people a ton of money that don't always look like us either. So when you talk about gender inequity and HIV prevention research, we talked about the Discover trial, who was left out of that, again, intentionally, and what that means to carry conversations forward. When you talk about equity and access of PrEP, super minoritized people in that conversation are women. If we're not included in the research, we most certainly will not be part of the conversations that advance the science for those groups of folks. So that limits our already limited options. And so Black women in this country are most disproportionately affected by HIV. So it really just is a shitstorm of nonsense that continues to support the burgeoning epidemics in these populations of people year after year after year after year. So PIBA comes in and we say, enough is enough. Let's do a little something different. And we start by claiming and naming these systems of historical oppression that keep us sick here in this country and globally. So lack of education, I heard somebody call that out. Lack of medical coverage. Michael so diligently offered that the majority of Black folks in the South, if you superimpose a map of where HIV lives, both in prevalence and incidence, also in the South. When you look at poverty and lack of education, add that onto that, also in the South. Do you all see how there's a confluence of inequities that are working together to support HIV as a mainstay in the health of these people? Are we clear? Because y'all are quiet. Either you haven't heard what we said, or y'all are just absolutely mesmerized by what you were hearing.
Next slide is interactive. So
which one? I hear that. So other factors that we have not talked about but should be, at the top of your mind: housing, transportation, food insecurity, mass incarceration, don't get me started, the criminalization of the Black body, whether it be in the prison industrial complex or the criminalizing the basic fundamental sex work that we sometimes have to practice to sustain our lives, substance use, intimate partner violence, and other social issues.
So this is where we're gonna get interactive again. For the sake of time, we're not gonna break into groups like we anticipated, but we want to look at some of the subpopulations neglected in PrEP outreach. So I'm going to name some of these subpopulations and just throw out an answer of how we can better how we can better reach some of these subpopulations who are often left out of conversations around PrEP. So cisgender women. What are some ways we can engage cisgender women around PrEP? Black women.
I heard sex positive approaches. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. So I heard sexual liberation. I heard inclusion. We have to see ourselves in some of the images. I know y'all see those HIV commercials every 30 seconds. How many of those for you? Who do you see yourself in those commercials? I don't. I hit the click. I hit the clicker and keep right on going. In the back.
And I love how you frame the difference between sexualized and sexual empowered, because I think sometimes we miss that when we talk about sexual empowerment. We think sexualization is sexual empowerment, and those are two different things.
Completely different. It's about freedom of choice. Sir. Uh huh.
We would go to the hair shop and the salon, and that's where we got a lot of our information.
Can you start over? Your story is so important to amplify, but we missed it because the mic was not in your hand. Start over for me real quick. Your name and where you're from?
My name is Zami Tinashe Hemingway. My pronouns are Zami, he, and him. I'm from Inglewood, but I live in the
What?
Yeah.
Come on, the what?
So what I was saying was, I'm a trans man, and when I was a child, I spent a lot of time in the hair salon with my mom and my sisters, and that's where we got all of our information. We found out what was going on in the community, but we also found health needs that we needed to do, where different resources were, et cetera, were in the community. And so I think about the barber shops as well for like cis men and trans masculine men as well. So like putting that information, education, even hosting things at the salons and barber shops.
Thank you for that. So really that's the true definition of meeting people where they are and not where you need them to be. Madam, your name? She's a ringer.
Hello.
Hi.
Mandisa. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I was thinking really of cisgender women, and trans men as well. Not that they're the same, of course, but what's needed is also us checking our externalized and internalized patriarchy and misogynoir and trans misogynoir and like in terms of often that's why folks aren't here because we don't make the space for our people. Like we always say, like, how come you don't come? How come you don't participate? And not what have I internalized that is further enacting violence in people's lives that I think need to be here. So I think that's a question like that we can ask all of us. Like if we're not cis, women or trans, women or men, ask ourselves what do we need to unlearn and make it a practice.
That's great. That's true inclusivity.
And since you mentioned it, what are some other ways that we can engage transgender women in PrEP outreach? Specifically, again, Black transgender women. Anybody work with transgender women around HIV outreach? Okay, I see a few hands. Just jump in.
Come on, y'all. Let's see a little shy.
We family. Just yell it out. I saw hands throughout the crowd like doing this. Just yell out.
Keith Marshall, he, him, his from San Diego, California. And I think what we do is we do a lot of testing events around bathhouses because, there, where sex workers could be working. So we go there to ensure that we are, helping navigate and provide those resources in spaces where we know they may be at as well.
Okay, thank you. I'm a Triton, so I'm with you in San Diego, just a little though. Over here in the back with the glasses. Straight ahead, on your left. With the glasses. Yes, ma'am. I saw that little hand. Project, please.
I think, we had a equality program this year, and it was focused on um, a population that we wanted to reach, and we chose African American women. The first thing that I obviously am not African American, so I reached out to the community and said, who can speak for me? Let me know how I can reach your community. And then we went to experts on how to market that, and then the media, like how to play that in media, how to get that out to different communities.
Thank you. Other hands that were so tiny. And then we have one in the front when you have a moment, Rico.
My name's Sam, they, them pronouns. And one of the things that can be a huge help is actually providers that not only know about PrEP, but also trans issues, because I've had trans clients come in and ask about, like, will this impact my hormone usage or anything like that? And I don't know, I'm not a provider, but the providers need to know about that. And also just even, there are times where I've had providers ask me, like, how do I address this person? And I'm like, you can use the name they put on the form, the preferred name.
Seems like such a common sense thing to do, right?
Yeah, but
like what?
The fact that I've had to be that, like, for lack of a better term, like the trans person whisperer
Yes.
at a clinic, I'm like, I should not have to be the person they ask when they go, what do I say? And it's like, just ask them the questions you would ask everybody else. It's really
Right.
not that confusing.
It's a teachable moment, though, right? We want to build allyship, but it also, you raise a really good point to the point that we made earlier. Right? We won't understand how the research or some of these treatment options that are rolling out impact the lives of trans people if they're not included in the research. Right? You gotta go back to these paradigms of equity.
So I love to talk, y'all. My name is Latoya Swan, and I am from Austin, Texas. So I know about the South thing, and Hot Wheels down there is not our friend. When we talk about
Hot Wheels, it took a minute to click. I was like, they have a manufacturing
we
center?
call them Hot Wheels down there. So I own my own nonprofit called Allure Alliance, and that's one of the things that we do. We found that there was a gap in PrEP care in Austin, Texas with black people, but there's only 7% of black people in Austin because they've all been gentrified, moved out. So, of course, when we get our numbers, the numbers are, oh my God, all the black people have HIV. So then we get totally oversaturated with 10-year dated information that's not mind blowing, that's not mesmerizing, that's not innovative. And what we've learned is with these organizations, these institutions, they're writing to the grant for the numbers. Our people become SROs, right? So it's like they're not people anymore, they're dollar signs. So if they can't write it into the grant, then we're getting told, oh, we don't have the money for that right now.
Yeah, we can't outreach that population. They're not in our grant. They don't help us meet our numbers. This person been so patient in the front, Rico.
Okay.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you. My name is Gavin, and you see him, he, him, his pronouns, also from San Diego.
Whoop, whoop.
I, myself as a queer trans man, I think I know many folks have said this all day, every day, right? And hiring folks from the community to serve the community, right? Because when we engage with, especially when I engage with transgender women, we don't have the same identity, and especially the black trans women, but we can at least relate across our transness and breaking down some of that medical mistrust of, this is PrEP. It puts the power into your own hands where maybe power is not in your hands. And I found that really useful, at least in my conversations of PrEP outreach with trans women and also trans men. And I think also in San Diego, we have a high population of folks who are Afro-Latina and Afro-Latin, right? And so having the knowledge about, is, are these payment assistance programs, if folks are accessing them, are they going to impact my immigration status? Are they going to impact anything like that? So having like folks equipped with like that knowledge, and also the person back there, I don't remember your name, I'm sorry, but echoing that, like having systems that is for PrEP, but also for HRT, and having like holistic services. But yeah, thank you.
Great point. Thank you for your patience. You were just.
And for the sake
Well,
of
I'ma get you.
for the sake of time, I'm sorry.
No, go.
For the sake of time, we're not going to go through the whole list, but I want to take a couple of more off. But I want you to look at the whole list and keep this conversation going amongst your colleagues, amongst other people at the conference, amongst your community. So just keep this conversation going. But I'm going to pick off like two more before we go on. All right, so I'm actually going to pull this one. I want to know what about, because I feel like this is a conversation we don't always have, what about senior citizens and older adults? How can we engage senior citizen and older adults around PrEP outreach?
Crown, I see you. I saw you ready to jump out of that chair. Come on, Crown. What you got? Mm-hmm.
Right. And I want, and since we're talking about intersectionality, I want to add an extra layer onto that. You know, I've linked a lot of people to
Ooh,
PrEP services.
extra layer. What layer are we adding? I
Well,
love it.
so I've talked to, working in a PrEP clinic, I would have like a lot of older gay men who would come to seek PrEP because they would have a primary care provider who told them that they don't need it. And when you start having those conversations, where it became a learning moment for me is you have people who feel like they've been running from this their whole lives, you know, because they've been around since the early days of the epidemic and have lost community members and friends who are like, it's a sigh of relief that I can have this tool, and my primary care provider thinks that I'm not having sex, you know? So again, I think that's where the, you know, looking at those conversations of how we engage, I think that's when we talk about, you know, providers having to let go of their own biases about who needs and who doesn't need PrEP. Gonna go with one more group and then we're gonna move to the next one. I wanna go with people who use substances.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And it's those same biases we see in treatment as well.
Yeah. Others. I'm so sorry, I missed you. Come on, Black Hat.
Okay. Rap.
Rap, Black Rap. Rap.
Hi, everyone. My name is Audria Russell. I am with Iris House. Iris House in location in Plainfield, not the New York City Iris House. One of the groups that you have listed there, you didn't call, but if you would
Sure.
indulge me, okay, the immigrants. That seemed to be a huge issue, and I'm talking also from personal experience as I'm an immigrant, I'm a Jamaican immigrant, and one of the biggest challenges that we find in the community where our office is, which is in central Jersey, Plainfield, it's the immigrant population is steadily growing. It's almost to 50% Central Americans mainly, some sprinklings of Africans and people from Africa, I should say. And other parts of the world. The challenges with PrEP, language, and images that we see on TV. We do outreach in the community. We find the main stakeholders and we engage them, individuals we know who help others with issues around immigration. The next barrier to that, doing outreach within the immigrant population, is also understanding of the law. We have host community forums where we have presentations talking about accessing medical care. And even though the law has changed because of the new administration with regards to individuals thinking that if they access assistance, they're going to have to pay it back. One of the challenges, my challenge, I should say, how do we communicate effectively across not just cultural barriers, but generational barriers, generational lines within the immigrant population? If anyone have any tips, I'm here for them.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Mandisa.
Um, Thank you for focusing on people who use substances. I was thinking of this in terms of people who use substances, folks who are sex workers, folks who are immigrants. Often people don't access because of fear of further criminalization. And so ensuring that we are taking all safeguards not to share people's health information. You know,
Can you say a little bit more about
I
that?
can definitely. If
Just a little
there's
bit?
anyone from health departments in this room, if there's anyone who are providers, it is really important that if law enforcement tries to get information, you do what you can to actually fight that, because it's not just about one aspect of someone's health information, it's their whole record. That is a further barrier. Folks live in fear of, I don't want to get tested because if ICE gets called, I'm SOL. I don't want to come here. I'm a sex worker and like I'm in fear of having a cops call and now I don't have income. I use substances. I don't want to come because folks are going to see my track marks, perhaps call cops. I'm SOL, because prison makes everything worse. And that's something that folks can do to make it easier and to build that trust. Folks know, that is not the first line to just call the cops on people, which unfortunately is a very common thing.
Thank you. We're gonna take one more over here. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm gonna let Rico.
Yes,
Let
Rico, we'll defer to your expertise. So sorry.
Y'all have been shade in the back. Gee.
Ooh, I thought I heard something over there. Let me come back to the back because I'm feeling the heat on my neck. Let's see here. Hi, over to the left, your right.
Hi, I'm Ronald Murray from Columbus, Ohio. Greetings from the Midwest.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to talk about my last job, and before I do that, I want my sister to jump on me. So my last job, I started a behavioral health clinic inside of a municipal court building. So what I had the privilege of doing was starting the first behavioral health clinic in the country where individuals would be inside, it was in the probation department, and 15 municipal court judges in the probation department would send their clients to us, whether they need to be linked to mental health counseling, substance use counseling. We were able to get them linked to their, I had people who were providing SNAP benefits, and they would send them to my program. My staff, we would have counselors on site who provide assessments for them there. They actually get the treatment services there. We were linked up to all these other things. But the beauty about it was I also thought out the box, because I started, prior to that job, I worked at a halfway house for people who are transitioning out of prison. And one of the programs I was able to start there was a program for victims of human trafficking, specifically for cisgender women. At the time, it was cisgender women, not specifically. And so that's how I got the courthouse job. So what I did was I always worked in HIV. I've been working in HIV since 1995. And a lot older than I look. Thank you. Hello?
Period. That was like 1995.
Yeah.
But go
Probably
on.
30 years, October 5th. Thank
Go
you.
on.
Hello?
We're with you.
I'll be 50 next year, Black on Crack. Anyway. So, all that to be saying, so what I did was I linked with our local, where I work right now, Equitas Health, and I had our young prep providers come in and set up shop because I knew that we had two different courses: a PAC program, which is a victim human trafficking, which the judges could sentence you in, and then we had the catch court, which is also a sex workers program, which you had to volunteer to be in. But they always had court; they had to meet every Tuesday and Thursday. So I had the prep providers outside in the hallway. And so as the women would come in down the hallway, sometimes they were trans women as well, coming out the hallway, they would pass the table and just talk to these young, and most of them were gay men, talk to young gay boys, and they would start talking to them, and they started getting them prep. So it was the probation officers and judges didn't know anything about what was going on, but they were getting tested for HIV, tested for STIs, getting linked to PrEP. And so now that I work at Equitas, now they're more embedded. Now they're in their groups, so the women are participating in groups weekly. They embed inside of this. So the whole list you have there is also embedded in criminal justice. So in the probation department again, I came in and I started kind of a social service inside of probation department. So what I talked to the judges about doing, instead of putting these clients who are suffering from substance use disorder, send them to me. Let me get them linked in the MAT. Let me get them linked in the counseling. So out of the 15 judges, judges are gonna be assholes, excuse my language. 5 of them use my program, and then out those 5 of them, the program lasted. It's still going on. I actually left, but it's still going on. But what's happening now is that instead of, if you have 2 charges on certain things that indicate that you are substance use disorder, all these things here, they send them directly down to the 5th floor, which is where my program is housed at. And we would do an assessment with you to see what we can do to put you in place, whether that's linking to HIV services, whether that's get you back linking to care, whether that's get you to mental health. If we are providers on site that we can either get you assessment right then and there, or get you an assessment, whether that needed within the next 48 hours. And I collaborate with 50 partners in the community that say, hey, we want these numbers, send them to us. And so the part of the partnership was, if I call you from the courthouse, you have to get us into there within 72 hours. Whether that was into Ryan White programming, whether that was in case manager, whether that was in substance use counseling, whether that was in detox, whether that was in residential counseling. So we have to look at criminal justice and actually work with our courthouse, because every purple issue you're talking about is housed there. You just have to get them to think differently.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so let's just check on the left real quick so I don't get any more shade. Anybody else on the left in this area? All right, we're good. It's awful. Do you forgive me? Do you forgive me? It doesn't seem like it. Mandisa, do you forgive me? You should. Okay, good. About a little 50 in the back over there.
Okay, so just kind of going to give a little more background. So we did the first PIBA summit. Sorry, I'm trying to move the screen over so I can see my side. You zoomed out. Okay. First PIBA summit was held in Atlanta, Georgia, on September 13th, 2022, at Thrive SS. We convened advocates representing Atlanta Black women leaders on PrEP, PrEP for All, Treatment Action Group, AVAC, I Strive Research Lab, Equity and Impact Solutions, Georgia State University, and Positive Impact Health Centers. We also engaged Black community stakeholders on the gaps in PrEP access. We strategized on what a national PrEP program needs to address racial disparities. Also mobilized Black advocates to create a community demand for a national PrEP program, which is still ongoing. And we released For Us, By Us, PrEP in Black America, a master plan for HIV prevention, which you can download. If you want to put it in your phone now, you can download it at prepforall.org/PrEP in Black America. And we convened our second PrEP in Black America Summit in New Orleans so I live in Atlanta, and my hometown's New Orleans, but I promise I didn't stuff the ballot box. We all voted for those 2 cities. And we expanded on the topics that we touched on during the first PrEP in Black America Summit, where we expanded on topics of intersectionality, HIV criminalization, and legislation and judicial cases that affect PrEP access. And if you go to the For Us, By Us, PrEP in Black America, Master Plan for HIV Prevention in Black America, say that 5 times fast. Next slide. So out of that first convening, we came up with three key recommendations for increasing PrEP access in the Black community. First, we have to energize the Black public health workforce to lead HIV prevention responses. When we say we need to energize the Black public health workforce, we talked about seeing people who look like you, but it definitely goes further than that. It's not just outreach workers and case managers, which I think is very important. I've had clients who've said, "Hey, I feel more comfortable confiding in you because we're from the same community." But we also need to have we also need to have the boards of these organizations represent us. We need to have management and executive staff represent, because we are with the, we do make up the bulk of the epidemic right now. We're the most disproportionately impacted. So when you walk into an organization, it's not just seeing people on the front lines, but also the people who are writing the grants, the people who are making the decisions, the people who are doing the research. Because as Danielle pointed out, women got left out of the Discover trial, correct? Women got left out of the Discover trial. Do you think that would have happened if a Black woman was a principal investigator on that study? So definitely we have to energize the Black public health workforce, educate the Black masses on the science and effectiveness of PrEP. As I was just telling them earlier this morning, I had someone who I worked with who was in a PrEP study. Years ago, and young Black queer person who had access to PrEP and said they stopped taking it because even though they were in this study and they were getting the medication for free, nobody explained to them, at words they said, what I'm putting in my body. And unfortunately, this person stopped taking the medication and seroconverted. So it takes more than just making, even if we address like coverage barriers, which is very important, and as we address a lot of these other issues, we have to make sure that not only are we educating people, but educating people in a community-led way, making sure that the messaging is created for us, by us, and it's in a way that we can easily digest and understand. And that's not to say that we can't understand, that we are incapable of understanding, but that's saying that a lot of times the messaging is not in the language that we talk about people in our community. Or what I hate is when you see these see campaigns or ads for something, and it's like, wait, y'all using our slang, but it's obvious y'all didn't. Like y'all had maybe one of us in the room, like right, just putting together slang words that don't even go together, so or assuming that we all talk in slang, so basically again having those community led campaigns so that we can see what works with the community, what doesn't work with the community, to make sure they're getting the education that they need around PrEP and HIV. And lastly, supporting a federally funded national PrEP program. We want to address stigma, we want to address awareness and education, but like we said, we don't have Medicaid expansion in the South. We have to address those coverage barriers. And as we talked about earlier with Braidwood versus Becerra, we need a national PrEP program that is going to focus on uninsured individuals as well as underinsured individuals, because right now, Braidwood versus Becerra isn't being enforced because it's in appeals. But unfortunately, if it does go to the highest court in the land and they say, hey, we don't have to cover, insurance companies don't have to cover PrEP, that will leave people who even have insurance as underinsured because because their insurance providers won't cover the medications or the labs for it. So again, a national PrEP program won't solve everything, but it'll solve a lot of these barriers that we're talking about when it comes. And John is going to explain more about the national PrEP program. Oh, I thought you were right. Okay, I'll pivot to Rico.
Sure. I mean, and before I got started, tell you a little bit more about some of the reflections and outcomes from our recent Prep in Black America Summit. I do want to just go back to this point about the first recommendation that we had about strengthening the Black public health workforce, right? Because we know that this is easier said than done, right? Like we're actually currently fighting for our lives in many ways. So we have, while we have folks fighting, PrEP access in Texas who brought the Braidwood versus Becerra case. We also have the Supreme Court voting against or, ruling against affirmative action, which we know is going to have drastic impacts on our ability to strengthen the public health workforce for Black communities. And so just want to put that out there, right? Because, it's really important to kind of acknowledge that this is, this intersectional lens that we have, not everybody shares, right? The people who brought that Braidwood case don't care, know, have any appreciation for an intersectional lens, nor does the Supreme Court, unfortunately. So, this just makes our work that much harder. But we're in it for the long haul. So just got pivoting to our 2023 Prep and Black America Summit. These were some of the reflections that we received from participants. So we had over 100 participants who participated virtually and in person. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we definitely appreciated, a lot of folks appreciated the fact that we had a virtual option for those who couldn't make it there in person. That's very, very important. We acknowledge that, again, with an intersectional lens and acknowledging that different people have different abilities and needs, health needs. Not everybody was able to or felt comfortable being in person, right? And so we wanted to make sure that folks had that option. Folks said the entire summit was very well organized, presenters were very well informative, learned a lot about organizations that exist in my community. So, this speaks to a lot of the work and effort that we put into intentionally engaging with communities and people in Louisiana, right? We didn't want to kind of come in thinking that we had this, like we knew everything that people needed to know, right? Like we recognize that the strengths, people in communities have the strengths to heal themselves, right? And so we wanted to leverage that. Folks like Mandisa and other young people who participated in the panel as well. That was another kind of intersectional strength, right, that we had in the summit. We had a dedicated panel specifically composed of young people and facilitated by young people, which was really, really awesome and powerful. And then lastly, of course, we've benefited a lot from the White House, support from Harold Phillips, director of the Office of National AIDS Policy, was there, showed up in person right off the heels, I think, of the STD conference that happened in New Orleans as well. And so, it really meant a lot for us to have him there. And we have one more reflection from one of our co-organizers, Morris Singletary, who I will play for you.
Yeah, so this is footage from the Prep and Black America Summit in New Orleans. In both summits, we used Black-owned venues, Black-owned caterers. Like, it was black. Intentionally. And it's a long video, so we're only going to show a snippet of it. This is actually the world premiere, so you're the first to see it. As soon as I get a chance to sit down, we will also upload it to the prepforall.org/Prep and Black America website. And you can watch the whole video with commentary from those who attended as well.
And I just wanted to add, Harold Phillips from the White House was there, but we also got videos from the Congressional Black Caucus president, and we also got a proclamation from a local congressional leader in Louisiana. So
Troy Carter's office.
Thank you. So policy leaders are noticing our leadership in this field and are ready to stand with us and fight with us on this issue as well.
Sorry, I was mistaken. Morris Singletary was our MC during the summit. And
Prep Black America Summit, because we need a platform.
Okay. Uh-oh. There we go. So just giving a kind of quick overview of who was in the room. So we were very thankful to have representation from over 20 states. Most of the folks were in Louisiana, right, which was our full intent and purpose, and so we were thankful to see that. And just kind of just goes to show, I think, that we're a work in progress, right? We came a long way from our first summit, and it's just getting bigger and better with each year and attracting more interest. Hold on to your seats. We don't know where the next one summit is going to be held, but we're working on that. So as far as attendance, overwhelmingly, again, the participants were Black, which is what we wanted, right? That's what happened naturally and organically, and we appreciated that. mostly folks who identified as being a woman. Um, also critical for our conversation. And then we also found that most folks had most folks had never used PrEP before. So, again, we wanted to, intentionally target folks who could benefit from having these conversations, learning about PrEP, learning about the policy and advocacy related issues. And that was what we were able to achieve to get, folks in that room who identified as such. So you see the breakdown here, overwhelmingly were folks who had never used PrEP before, but we also had some folks in the room who were, considering using PrEP, considering stopping PrEP because of cost issues, people who had used PrEP before, but who had stopped for whatever reason not related to cost. And then we had about 10% of folks in the room who were currently on PrEP. So we definitely benefited from having those perspectives in the space as well. Current PrEP users, so among folks who were current PrEP users, most of the folks were on average using about 4 to 6 years. We want to get to the point where there are more people who've been on PrEP for 10 plus years, right? PrEP has been approved. Now it's in various forms, 3 forms, since 2012, well over a decade, which was part of the reason why, USCHA, mobilized all of us because she knew that we were approaching the 10-year anniversary of PrEP and something like this was necessary. And so, we would love over time of having these summits to get more folks who identify as being on PrEP for 10 plus years. Also, lots of folks who were living with HIV in the space as well as allies, and to kind of learn from each other and support. So it really kind of lends to the intersectional lens that the summit also has. So I'm gonna, read through some of these statements. So we, did an evaluation of the summit, of both summits, and this recent summit was a little bit more involved in terms of evaluating, outcomes, right? And so, we have various statements that we posed to participants. The material was helpful. The summit made me learn more about PrEP use. The presenters kept my attention, etc. And you see that overwhelmingly, by and large, folks had very positive experiences with the summit. Before I go to the next slide, I do want to also just note that, as I mentioned, we're a work in progress, right? We don't want to just kind of be up here tooting our own horn. We have definitely done a lot of great work over the past couple of years. We also recognize that we have, some more work to do in terms of being inclusive, right, in a space. And so, what I didn't show was a graph showing that, by and large, folks in the room were, highly educated folks, college educated, folks with advanced degrees, et cetera. And we know that that's not necessarily reflective of the entire population. That the black community is not a monolith. And so we need to, do a better job. We acknowledge that, do a better job of reaching communities that, don't have access to this information, don't have access to higher education. And so that's something we're going to continue to work on.
Great. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Thank you for that. And it speaks to kind of breaking out of this biomedical sort of, scientific landscape, right? Like we know that PrEP also has psychological benefits for people. People are able to kind of enter relationships with folks of different HIV status than their own, right? Build families, like all sorts of things that, we're thankful to kind of be in conversation with folks at the CDC and the White House as well to kind of focus in on that like marketing aspect so it's not just focused on, prescribing a medicine. So thank you for that.
Great. So now we're going to pivot into like a policy kind of conversation, right? We're going to do an activity to start framing us on this. Agree, disagree. So I'm going to put up a series of statements. And if you agree with said statement, stand up, right? And you might even be asked why you're standing, right? Or why you're sitting, right? So those are the rules. Stand up if you agree, stay seated if you disagree, right? So the first one is, before today, you have heard about the White House proposal for a national PrEP program. If you agree, stand. If you disagree, stay seated. Okay, great, thank you.
You can stay standing if you agree with the next statement.
Sure. Addressing stigma, criminalization, and medical mistrust should be integral to a national PrEP program. Love to see it. Great. Next one. The role of implementing a national PrEP program should sit with the CDC.
So who should be the primary administrator of a national PrEP program?
I see some
If you think.
Explain why it's a tricky word. Young man in the front.
We're clarifying question as before.
It could be anything you define as role. It could be money. It could be capacity building. It could be training. It could be grants. It could be whatever you deem their role should be. If you think they should have a role in implementing a national PrEP program,
Could we name some alternative bodies that kind of give a comparison?
the next. hmm So the next question is, should HRSA, this should say HRSA, not Ryan White program, should HRSA have a role in implementing a national PrEP program? HRSA is the program that runs Ryan White programming.
What hesitation do you have? Because you said you wanted to have.
You want to have this discussion. Like, what is the hesitation with standing up, whether for CDC, whether for HRSA? Maybe these two organizations and agencies are not where should not have a role. So what we want to have this conversation. Oh, I don't know.
A role.
A role.
And so when we say a role, that could mean distribution of medication, that can be lab coverage, that can be demand creation and creating campaigns. So like those different components.
So can I ask a question? I have a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Everyone else can take a seat
Yeah.
except those who need a clarifying.
Yes.
Okay.
I saw your hand. Don't sit down.
Full disclosure, I
Or
am a
another
federal
one.
employee, and I work for one of the agencies that you just mentioned.
Yes.
But given that I know what my agency does, I wonder if others who are not working for the federal government understand what each of those agencies do and what their missions are, where they get their funds, what kind of restrictions. Because if you're not familiar and you think, oh, just they do this and this other group does this thing, you may be saying like, oh no, they shouldn't have it because of a personal experience or whatever the case might be. So to clarify, I think it's not about which agency, it's more of what do you see an organization or agency doing in terms of a national PrEP campaign or PrEP
program. What does that look like? And then ask the question, well, who would be in the right position to execute that program? Because those are two very different agencies with different pots of money and different people that they respond to. So it may not be at the federal level, it may be at a different level, but those are the things that need to be discussed. But I think before you get to who, you need to get to the what.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'm Jerome Holiday, registered nurse for UW Hospital and Clinics, and I also work in infectious disease. And I now sit on the board of directors for the CAC. I submit to that as well, because one of the things the University Hospital does, they work with the RAND-wide program for PrEP, and a lot of that is government funded. But also, like she was saying, giving it to somebody else that don't know that exact funding and where that funding going, especially in different states. Because me coming from the South, was born and raised in the South, and I go back there, they don't have rand-wide funding, and up north they do have it. Do they? Well, I didn't know Memphis, Tennessee had it. It's different parts to it. Well, see, I didn't know that. So, like she was saying, different states, as far as what programs they have, might not be able to recognize which one of those organizations is actually funding that program. I did not know that because Memphis, Tennessee do not have. I didn't know they had Rand White funding for that. I don't think they do though. But I don't think they do, but maybe they do. I didn't know that. But I was just saying, yeah, there's a point to be discussed on what places do have that funding and which organization have that funding would be taken away from that funding as well. So
Great. Thank you so much.
And this is the discussion we wanted to have, right? We wanted to invoke discussion and have other perspectives.
Because it dictates how we mobilize the community around a national PrEP program. So even when they have those parts that aren't quite clear, we need to be able to know that.
My name's Rebecca, she, her, hers. Just maybe a little bit of ignorance here, but HRSA also funds federally qualified healthcare centers, which their sole mission is to provide healthcare at no or little cost to people who don't have access to healthcare, or whether they're unemployed or anything like that. Couldn't they leverage what they're doing, because this is about healthcare, dental, medical, mental health, the FQHCs do, as well as for our 340B pharmacies. Why isn't PrEP a large part of that, and not just thinking about Ryan White with HRSA, but what they do with FQHCs around the country?
Thank you. It also goes to support the question why we asked. Do you think it should be housed in HRSA or? Thank you for your response and your input.
Hello, everybody. My name is Rashika. I'm a tester for Hyacinth Foundation located in New Jersey. And with those last two questions that were asked, I was kind of hesitant. But when you think about it, they do play roles. It's just like when you think about everybody's important. The janitor is just important in keeping a building going, as the CEO is of keeping a business going. They do play a role. Now, if the question is, should they do more? Then yes, maybe they could add more to it. But they do have their part. CDC prints out all the statistics of the counties and the city that you live in. So that helps us to go out and target those populations in that small community or that big community. So they do play a part. It's just if we want them or need them to do more.
Creola, Kizard Hampton, Chicago, she, her, hers. I work with 27 different community-based Black-led organizations across the state. My background is in integrated marketing communications. I worked on the introduction of NutraSuite. So when I see, again, I'm going to health and wellness, because PrEP is prevention, not just a treatment. So I think FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and again, in in collaboration with, to your point, the Center for Disease Control, because we're talking about a disease. But still, this PrEP as opposed to PEP, CDC, PrEP, prevention, health and wellness, keeping me well, I think would need to be a shared responsibility in its distribution, promotion, et cetera, et cetera. CDC, HRSA, FDA.
So I'm on that like half sit thing of when you say a role, I agree, partially because like Ryan White, I know if doesn't pay my whole paycheck, at least is a decent chunk of it because my program is grant funded. But it's also, I was going to say that specifically the CDC has a history of fumbling the ball at times. And if it was like the role and it was advertised as something led by the CDC, might not help its cause because of just its history. I was going to say, even with COVID, where they were like, oh no, we can drop the restrictions. It's not that numbers are going down, it's just we can drop it now. So it just feels like, depending on how much of a role, would be more of the question than the role itself.
One more comment, and then we'll move on to the White House proposal for a national PrEP program. Thank you for these comments. This is what we wanted.
Jason Coleman, just a comment. I'm a little rusty on this, but I think a while back there was a coordinated statement of need that states did to try to bridge Ryan White and CDC, the HRSA and CDC roles. And I wonder if I see a role for both. So I'm kind of a half sitter too, right? HRSA does accounting stuff and manages medicine a lot, but CDC's got to be out there traditionally with the prevention part of it, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's a big part of their role as well. So I'm just curious if there's not an opportunity for a bridge here. I don't know that either is ideal. I think that people do have problems wherever you look at either agency, but the structure's there, and perhaps to look at that structure and see how it can be modified and perhaps bridged. I know in 2017 we started working toward those bridges, and I don't know where that went. I'm a little bit rusty on that.
You're stealing our thunder. You're
So
stealing
that
our
is a
thunder. You're
great
foreshadowing.
segue.
Exactly.
I did not pay you, I promise.
It's not a
about the White House National PrEP program, right? That is aiming to do just that, right? Is to bridge and bring each of these agencies that we mentioned will have a role in providing PrEP to under and uninsured individuals, right? This is the equity mission is the center of it. Improving PrEP access for Black and Brown people, right? And all of these things around it will feed into that equity mission, right? And these slides are from Harold Phillips from the Office of the ONAP. ONAP. And these arrows are feeding into that equity mission, right? Training new providers to prescribe PrEP, right? Mitigate access barriers for coverage solutions, fund points of entry where people seek care and services, expand the mission of providers with a track record of cultural responsiveness, invest in knowledge, demand, and confidence generation, navigate to enhance wraparound services. All of this feeds into this equity mission that this plan is aiming to do. So what is the initial of this? President Biden put in his proposal for FY23, but also FY24, but also FY23. Our budget proposal includes PrEP delivery program to advance equitable access to PrEP. Sorry, I'm a New Yorker. I speak fast, so let me know if I speak too fast. By providing PrEP at no cost, eliminating costs for enabling services, and establishing a provider network in underserved communities. The first year is proposed to have $237 million increased funding, right? As we know, we are in a political environment where over $700 million are proposed to be cut. So, yeah, that's why these conversations are important. We're not pivoting away from this national PrEP program, but we need to deal with multiple fires at the same time, right? As we always have to do. The budget also requires states, Medicaid, and CHIP beneficiaries to cover PrEP and associated lab services with no cost sharing, and places guardrails on utilization management practice, such as prior authorizations and step therapies, right? So this is kind of like the diagram of like, it starts with the test, HIV positive test, HIV negative test. So this is the core strategies of this program. A national PrEP program, HIV PrEP program, should address all stages of the cycle of PrEP delivery, right? And those are numbered in the circle, the middle circle. So 1, 2, prevention knowledge, prevention self-awareness and preferences, prevention motivation, healthcare access and cost, provider issues, adherence and persistence, and periodic readjustment to adjust prevention. National drug access is key to successful implementation and must cross state lines, right? Support the creation of a status-neutral care delivery built upon the national Ryan White systems to cover laboratories and clinical care. Support public health to generate demand and build PrEP navigation coordination from key points of entry that serve people underrepresented in PrEP utilization. And the public health component of all of the program must address the needs of all levels of insurance, from underinsured, uninsured, who require complete coverage and support, to privately insured who may benefit from navigation and wraparound services. As we heard, there is a court case that could also affect those who are insured, right? So we need to all levels of insurance. So the gaps that this program is trying to fill in the PrEP ecosystem. The first is to create a federally administrated national PrEP drug assistance program, PrEP DAP, for uninsured and underinsured people. We call that the PrEP Pass, right? It's a virtual or physical card that you could use for labs, for drugs, that is loadable and whatnot, right? Support PrEP clinical and lab services for uninsured and underinsured individuals. Build and support navigation to and delivery of clinic and community-based wraparound services. Expand, educate, and support the provider network. Enhance the existing PrEP infrastructure and points of entry for the National PrEP Program to create a nationally connected and locally linked matrix of PrEP services. And increase knowledge, confidence, and demand to achieve PrEP equity, right? So enhancing the existing PrEP infrastructure, right? Communities considered hard to find, I don't like that term, but I did not create these slides, to find routinely access public health services that are related to PrEP in places that do not have capacity to start individuals on PrEP, or navigate them to in-person and telehealth options. Provide public health funding to health departments and community-based organizations to expand the capabilities of these point of entries and service providers. PrEP navigation at these sites will include an insurance review to identify other coverage that would allow the client to transition off of the National PrEP program so that new individuals can be put on as the payer of last resort. And people requiring these services will be navigated to the PrEP Pass, as we discussed before, and programs that support clinical and laboratory services. Right? Support clinical and laboratory services, right? That's an essential part of the PrEP package, right? It's not just a pill, it's the testing that goes on around in the labs, and they're not free, right? So capitalize on existing reimbursement and care systems that act as a payer of last resort for HIV-related laboratory clinical services. This is where the Ryan White infrastructure could be used for lab services, right? Clinical services. It's not taking money away from HIV-positive individuals, it's adding money so that they can expand their reach to include HIV prevention, right? That was very clear from the White House. We are not taking money from HIV positive individuals and their programs that they need, is to add more money to expand the network and allow laboratories and other clinical services to be using that Ryan White infrastructure. Just said that. Teleprep embedded in the clinical settings to expand reach, right? Enrollment and coverage locally will include enrollment in this PrEP DAP or PrEP Pass. Resourcing these providers to serve PrEP patients capitalizes on the existing systems of Ryan White. and increases Ryan White's capacity for HIV prevention care. And this is kind of like the rationale because there was a lot of pushback from when this presentation was first given to some community members about including Ryan White in this PrEP prevention services. And this was the rationale is like these providers have decades of experience, right? Delivering culturally and linguistic responsive care to sexual and gender minority populations and people of color, Black people. Over 1,000 Ryan White sites supported many prescribers will expand to PrEP. In 2021, 70% of Ryan White clients were Black or Latinx, which are populations in which we need to increase access and uptake of PrEP. And Ryan White providers are located in a variety of settings, including CBOs, community health centers, health departments, academic medical centers. But one thing that came up in our conversations was, yes, if you're in like an Atlanta or a big city in the South, you may walk into a health clinic and you can't distinguish what that person's going in there for, right? But once you get more rural, right, and more away from those city centers, if someone walks into certain buildings, you know what they're there for, right? And that increases stigma, that increases not even going back to this building to get services, adherence issues, and all of this. So that was mentioned and taken into consideration for the draft legislation, which we haven't seen yet. Build and support navigation to and delivery of wraparound services, so directly and indirectly fund community-based organizations through CDC that serve target populations for PrEP to provide wraparound services. Enhancement of the Ryan White with these resources to support clinic-based wraparound services and status-neutral care coordination, and leverage community-based organizations. Funding CBOs directly, right? Who would support non-clinical base for wraparound services, right? Expand, educate, and support for the provider network, right? We all agree that HIV docs, infectious disease docs, are not the only ones that should be prescribing or doing anything about PrEP, right? OBGYN, if we're talking about Black women, right? OBGYNs, family planning, all these other providers that could really provide access or increase access to Black women. For PrEP, right? Facilitate the addition of new and non-traditional providers, including pharmacists and teleprep, by supporting the administrative steps needed to accept the National PrEP Program reimbursement through Ryan White and PrEP. Work with state insurance officials and private insurance to bring coverage into compliance for insured individuals. Support existing training programs, technical assistance programs, guideline development to ensure all PrEP providers deliver the highest quality PrEP services, right? And these are some of the training programs that already exist in HRSA and CDC and outside of these two agencies that could be used to expand, educate, and support this provider network. These are some discussion questions. So that is the National PrEP Program as was presented to us, right? These are not our words. The community came up with our plan for how this should look, and we consulted with, well, they created this, and they used our plan to develop and added on some other components to it. So I wanted to ask you some questions, right? Now that you've seen the summary of what is being proposed, what components are missing for you as providers, as individuals that are in the trenches on the ground, right? What is missing? What other things does the drafters of this program need to take into consideration for it to address the needs of the Black community, right? We can say it's equity driven all we want, but will it improve the situation of Black folks and Black community? That's what we want to know, right? Do you see this program as presented addresses the inequity of PrEP access among Black America? As we saw, 11% versus 78% for our white counterparts, right? That's a big gap, right? Do we think that this program will fill that gap? And how should the White House and other federal agencies engage community advocates and stakeholders in the process of making NPP a reality? Right? As Auntie Maxine said, nothing can get done unless we get loud. Right? So what do the White House and other federal agencies need to do to engage with us? We are voters, right? We have that power. So what can they do to engage us? And as Michael already mentioned, we're engaged with CDC, Division of HIV Prevention. Yeah, that's what it's called, right? Sorry, these acronyms. What we are already engaged with in conversation with CDC at that level to really, as PrEP and Black America Coalition, so that we could work together to see what support they need to get what they need to get done and what support we need to really push what we want as we're doing this work for the Black community. So I will stop there. I will open it up for any comments, any questions, any answers to these questions.
And while we're doing that, could we go to the QR codes also? Just a second. Okay, so we're gonna have. I'm gonna let you go. Just want to say we have 2 QR codes that we want you to scan before you leave today. So one, tell Congress to save HIV funding domestically and globally. If the QR code, if you can't reach it, the link is also bit.ly/save HIV funding now. You can have you have the opportunity. We have a pre-written letter already in there. You can make edits as needed or send it as is. You just put in your information. You can do it on your phone right now. It takes about 2 minutes. Putting your zip code, your senator and House representatives who represent you will come up. You can send a letter to them saying do not want them to cut HIV funding, both domestically with the proposed over $700 million proposed cut, as well as proposed cuts to PEPFAR as well, which impacts global HIV work.
And if you're in a state that is like your senators, congresspersons are gung ho about these issues, still send a letter because they could influence their colleagues, right? I'm from New York City, right? So my senators, they're on board. Most of the congresspersons are on board of New York City, but they can influence others to act accordingly, right?
And
you have another one, right?
Yeah, I have one more QR code. So I'm going to ask that allies not scan this QR code. So we have launched a what we call the PrEP and Black America Activist Network. So like we said, we want to elevate the voices of the Black community because as the PrEP and Black America Coalition, we do get to have conversations with people who influence policy and things like that and impact the work that we do. We want to we've created a network. We've already had some people sign up where basically we could you could send messages back and forth through email. It's a listserv. But as we get new information, we want to be able to share it with the community. Just so happened when the White House proposal came out, it just so happened to come out right before the PrEP and Black America Summit, where Harold was also in town where we planned it, which was total coincidence. So they got to hear feedback directly from members of the Black community. But if we didn't have a summit that was scheduled at that time, we would like to be able to send out an email and say, hey, this is a proposal that just came out, so that we can advocate for our community on what works and what doesn't work. Give us your feedback so that we could bring it to the table. So that's why it's really important that we want Black advocates to be able to be a part of this network.
Who's it for?
Black people.
Is it for allies?
Not for allies.
Just supposed to make sure.
Yeah, just want to, and there's so many other ways that allies can support, but we also have to have this, like we said in the early part with the report, we have to have this for us by us, these for us by us spaces and moments so that we can advocate for our community. Okay, and I'm gonna go. Thank you. And if you can, if you want to share it with others, if you don't have the QR code, it's also bit.ly/PIBA-network, all lowercase. And I'm gonna turn it back over since you've waited so patiently. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Manya. I was an emergency room nurse, trauma nurse for 20 years. This last year, I worked with the Southern Indian Health Council in San Diego, and I am the community health manager, MAT manager, and I run both of our clinics and our roaming medical unit. So what I'm missing from this is how we're getting into the emergency departments and getting that message to our case managers. And the thing is in the emergency room, our whole focus and what I would train people is, do they need surgery? Can we treat them? And can we discharge them out of the ER? There's no focus on aftercare, really. They say, okay, follow up with your primary care doctor. A lot of people do not have primary care doctors. So what would be amazing if we had some sort of information that we were mandated to include into that discharge, because everybody ends up in the ER. You have a urinary tract infection, you have your fingernail gets infected from this nail salon, like everyone ends up in the ER at some point for some reason, even walking in to get COVID tested. So we have to really focus on our emergency departments and getting our providers aware and getting that ensuring that aftercare is done. It's not just some form letter, which is exactly what it is. Hey, follow up with your primary care doctor if you have a fever or abdominal pain. We really have to get be more substantive in our discharge and our education for people that we do see in the emergency rooms. And I just want to say that I am so grateful to be here. I'm learning so much as a new community case manager and working with the MAT team. One of the things that we are doing in San Diego is we're getting, we do CPR. We are distributing Narcan everywhere. We started Stop the Bleed, which is from the Boston bombing. We're teaching people how to apply direct pressure and put tourniquets on people. And I really think PrEP is one of the things that should be folded into this. Like, let's get this CPR and the American Heart Association involved in teaching about PrEP and HIV and sexually transmitted diseases. My mom, she caught syphilis in the 1990s. She didn't, she got her first shot of penicillin, didn't go back and get the rest of them. She's only 69 years old. She had me young. And she is in a nursing home with end stage dementia because she didn't get her care. Now, if she had the knowledge and the ability to understand that HIV, syphilis, all the STDs, and again with Narcan, and in the emergency room, getting all this education in a more substantive way, then I think that we could prevent a lot.
Thank you so much. I know that it's getting close to the end, or it is the end of this session. But any other comments or? Yeah.
My name is Marcelo Maia. I'm with ACT UP New York. I think it's lacking on the strategy at Target. To say they're going to improve something that's abysmal is not that difficult.
I didn't get to read too much into it, but the national program sounds very similar to like what we have in California, which is like the PrEP assistance program. And at least what worked for us is, the health enrollment workers, is that we have like a monthly meeting that they let us give our feedback. And one of the biggest parts of addressing the inequalities and disparities within like communities is that they allowed for a PrEP immediate access, because I was reading through that. It's like you have to go through the insurance like process and all of that, which we have to do for PrEP AP as well, but we can do that immediate enrollment. So at least somebody can start same day, and then folks can do it on their phone too, and then get linked in. So I don't know if that would be really cool if they consider that in the national program, because especially across multiple identities or intersections of identities, if you're struggling to get, all that paperwork and all of that stuff. So.
So the bill hasn't been written and all the specifics haven't been nailed down. So any suggestion is welcome, and we hope to be kind of like a conduit to the community when it comes to Harold and formerly Dimitri, and others in CDC and HRSA as well, to provide those suggestions, right? Because you all are the ones that are in the trenches. You know your programs from state. They can learn from states who are doing it already, right? So that's a great suggestion. I wrote it down to bring it up to Harold. Any other last minute thoughts? If not, thank you so much for coming to the session. Our information is down there if you want to email us about policy, about research, about anything that you heard today, the next summit. Let us know and contact us.